Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous night we received a lot of very important updates. And before we start, I would like to point to one important detail that we have already discussed yesterday. If you remember, we discussed that yesterday, according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, between the 26th and the 27th of April of 2026, the Ukrainians, when attacking the territory of Russia, used just 3 drones. And we discussed that that attack was the smallest attack since the beginning of the special military operation. But between the 27th and the 28th of April of 2026, the Russians stated that the Ukrainians used hundreds of drones to attack the territory of Russia, and the Russians reported that more than 186 drones were destroyed over Russian regions overnight. And the sources are saying that the biggest number of drones were recorded in the direction of the city of Tuapse. And the thing is that the Ukrainians during the previous night once again attacked the Tuapse oil refinery, and we received lots of updates on this matter during the previous 12 hours. And this is basically the first picture that was published by pro-Russian sources and by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see just a fire after a massive attack on Tuapse, the oil refinery, which was recently extinguished, was hit again. And this morning we received lots of videos from the city of Tuapse and from the Tuapse oil refinery, and as we can see, once again the Ukrainians attacked this oil refinery, and as we can see according to this video, the Tuapse oil refinery was significantly damaged by the armed forces of Ukraine. Basically, the Tuapse oil refinery is about to be completely destroyed. If you remember, just yesterday we discussed some numbers regarding this situation. Let's discuss them once again. So according to information we have during the previous attacks that's been taking place that have taken place since the beginning of April of 2026, the Ukrainians managed to destroy 24 tanks, or 52% of the Tuapse capacity, of the Tuapse refinery capacity. Furthermore, 4 tanks were damaged, or 9%, and by the end of the 26th of April of 2026, the Russians had only 18 tanks, or 39% of total capacity of the Tuapse refinery. And right after we discussed these numbers, the Ukrainians had the Tuapse refinery once again, and it seems that the Ukrainians managed to deal damage and to destroy more tanks in this area. For example, these are the map of fire anomalies, and according to this map of fire anomalies, we can say that some tanks in this area and in this area were completely damaged and destroyed. Once again, we have a lots of videos. It's not just the thing that the Tuapse refinery was damaged or maybe even destroyed. This is an ecological disaster. We know that lots of problems with oil, and local sources are trying to stabilize the situation, to fix these things, but it seems that now it will take lots of time before the Russians are able to stabilize the situation and to restore the Tuapse refinery. But telling the truth, it seems that the Russians won't be able to repair or to fix the Tuapse refinery before the end of the conflict with Ukraine, because obviously the Ukrainians will continue attacking the Tuapse refinery until they reduce the total capacity of this refinery to 0%. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the previous days, the Ukrainians attacked deep inside of the territory that are under complete control of the Russian forces. We are talking about Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk regions, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, of their air defense force, of different trains, logistics with FP2 drones, and here we can see lots of explosions were recorded between the settlements of Melitopol, Donetsk and Lugansk. Now let's discuss the Russian attack. During the previous night, the Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and this morning the Minister of Defense of Ukraine stated that overnight the Russians used 123 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians, according to this update, managed to destroy just 95 drones. Lots of videos were published during the night. The Russians once again attacked the city of Chernihiv. We have lots of videos of how Russians were attacking the central part of the city. Here we can see probably something like a railway station that was destroyed as a result of several attacks with drones. Furthermore, the Russians continue attacking logistics of Ukraine in this area, and of course the Russians continue attacking objects of energy, infrastructures, gas stations, and so on. So the Russians are trying to to make the northeastern parts of Ukraine between the cities of Chernigov, Konotop, Shostka something like an area where impossible to live, which can force in the end the population of this region to leave this territory further in the western direction. Few explosions were recorded in the area of the settlement of Konotop, one of the most important logistics cities that lays on the line between the cities of Sumy and Kiev, where currently the Russians continue their counter-offensive operation. Explosions also were recorded on the territory of the city of Kryvyi Rog. As for this territory, the sources are saying that the Russians continue attacking objects of military infrastructure, some factories that the Ukrainians use for military purposes. And probably one of the most important videos is coming from the city of Dnipro. This video was published during the previous nights, and here we can see a Russian drone that was flying over the settlement of Dnipro these days. So this is a fresh video, and here we can see that the Russians have a stable connections with these drones. With this drone that the Russians were able to control the situation. The Russians were conducting a reconnaissance operation without any problems, which means that most likely this drone either had the connection with the Ukrainian Starlink system using the Ukrainian adapters, Ukrainian equipment, or the Russians were using their Bureau 1440 satellite systems to control this drone and to support a stable connection between this drone and the Russian headquarters. So, of course, when talking about consequences of attacks, the Ukrainians continue attacking the Russian export potential, but the Russians continue bombing and attacking small targets through the entire territory of Ukraine, trying to reduce the common Ukrainian capabilities to continue the conflict with the Russian side. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. We have lots of very important updates, and first let's talk about the northern Sumy direction. During the previous nights we received the video from the settlement of Sopich, and here we can see how the Russians were attacked by the Ukrainians with FPV drones, and these videos are very important, these episodes, because these episodes confirm that indeed the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement and to concentrate additional troops in this area. So several weeks ago the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed control over the settlement, but without videos or geolocations that could prove this. Now we have everything to confirm that indeed the settlement of Sopich is under complete Russian control. The southeastern Sumy direction. During the previous nights, additional changes were recorded around the settlement of Taraturina. I would like to remind you that just yesterday the Minister of Defense and the group of forces north confirmed Russian control over the territory. Today several mappers adjusted the map further in the western direction, showing additional advance of the armored force of the Russian Federation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Krasnopolye. The Kharkiv direction. The most important updates are coming from the area of the river of Volcha. Several pro-Russian sources stated that currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Pokolyana. The Russians are attacking the village, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this territory, and it seems that in coming days both the Minister of Defense and the group of forces north will confirm control over this territory. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that there are very heavy clashes on the line towards the settlement of Losovka and Shesterivka. So there are very heavy clashes, which means that the Russians, after a very long operational pause, resumed their offensive operation with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Bielye Kolodys from behind. In coming days, additional changes on the ground we may receive from this area as well. As for the most northeastern direction of the Kharkiv region, this morning both the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the group of forces north confirmed that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Zemlianky Zemlianky. This is the village which is located along the river of Volcha, and based on this report we have adjusted the map. Once again, these are the changes on the ground, and the Russians continue offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the river of Volcha between the city of Volchansk and the most northeastern part of Kharkiv region. And according to the current situation, the current status, we believe that in coming 2 or 3 weeks the Russians will finish the battle for this foothold, and right after the end of May holidays the Russians will continue offensive operation deep inside of the Kharkiv region. As for the Kupiansk and the Borova directions, we haven't received anything special. As for the Sloviansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, lots of changes were recorded, and these are the changes on the ground. I would like to remind you that just yesterday the Russians reported that as a result of clashes they established complete control over the settlement of Ozerne, and the Russians, which is the most important thing, published proofs that they have raised flags in the most western and in the central parts of the settlement, and during the night additional changes were recorded. According to several pro-Russian sources, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Ozerno, over this dense network of the fortifications, almost till the river of Seversky Donetsk Donbass. So the Russians, according to this configuration of the front line, established an operational encirclement for the armed forces of Ukraine who are currently located on the territory of the settlement of Krivaluka. In coming days, the Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back from this area, otherwise they would be encircled without any chances for evacuation. In coming days, we believe that the front line, the changes of the front line in this area will intensify because the Russians are getting closer and closer to the Seversky Donetsk Donbass canal, which means that the Russians establish stronger and stronger control over the main logistic lines that goes through the canal, and as soon as the Russians establish 100% control over this territory, the Ukrainians will not be able to support their contingent on this side of the canal. So which means that the changes will intensify from day to day. The Kostiantynivka direction, the Russians continue their offensive operation on the western flank of the settlement, in the area of the settlements of Stepanovka and Dovga-Balka, and as you can see during the previous 24 hours, lots of changes on the ground were recorded. Let's discuss everything in details. So once again, this is the situation by the end of the 24th of April, this is the 25th, this is the 26th, this is the 27th, and this is the beginning of the 28th of April of 2026, and according to these changes, we see that the Russians are trying to cut the settlement of Pincers, the settlement of Dovga-Balka and Pincers from the east and from the west, with the purpose to maintain the lines through the entire western flank of the Kostiantynivka direction. And from these positions, most likely the Russians will continue offensive operation further, both in the direction of the settlement of Nikolapolia and in the direction of the settlement of Alexeyevka-Drushkovka, with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Kostiantynivka from the northwest and to establish complete fire or even physical control over the rest of the city of Kostiantynivka from the northwest. Furthermore, today pro-Ukrainian sources published a very interesting video, and in this video we can see how Russians are trying to create another corridor, another pipeline, another let's say roads for offensive operation, and the Ukrainians are saying that most likely this is the situation in the area of the city of Kostiantynivka. So the Russians are trying to create another corridor let's say below the surface, underground tunnel, with the purpose then to attack the Ukrainians somewhere from behind. So which means that in coming days we might see another surprise from the Russian side somewhere in the Kostiantynivka direction or maybe somewhere else, but obviously this might happen very soon. The Dobropillia direction, during the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded to the south of the settlement of Dobropillia. The Russians continue advancing. Today, several sources confirmed additional changes on the ground in the Russian favor in the area of the settlement of Belitska. According to different sources, the settlement of Belitska is already under complete Russian control. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, the settlement of Belitska either under control of the armed forces of Ukraine or in the gray zone. According to neutral mappers, the settlement of Belitska partially under control of Russians, and the second part is under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. One thing is clear, there are very heavy clashes, and another thing is clear, that the Russians continue advancing, and every single week the map is being adjusted in the Russian favor. As for the area of Grishna, the Russians continue their offensive operation in this area as well. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. We have improved and expanded the infiltration zone. According to this information, the Russians continue offensive operation in the northwestern direction with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Sergeyevka and to cut this settlement in pincers from the south and from the north. Furthermore, the Russians continue improving their positions in the northern direction towards the next defense layer, towards the last defense layer of the settlement of Dobropillia between the villages of Svetlae and Kryvorozhzhia. So we are talking about this territory. This is a very important defense layer of the armored forces of Ukraine that the Russians are about to begin fighting for. If Ukrainians lose control over this defense layer, most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions in the city of Dobropillia itself. And this is a very important city. It's something like not just control over another city in the Donbas region. This is a media victory because if Ukrainians lose control over the city of Dobropillia, the Russians will enter the operational space and the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the northern direction without almost any resistance from the Ukrainian side, because the settlement of Dobropillia is the last big city, last settlement in this direction, and the next big city is located a bit further in the northwestern direction. This is the city of Lazova, and the distance between the settlement of Dobropillia and the city of Lazova is around 67 kilometers. So which means that 67 kilometers without fortified areas, without big strongholds, and without cities and citadels, which means that the Russians most likely will move much faster in this area in comparison with the current pace of offensive operation. Now let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded around the settlement of Guliapolska. No doubt the settlement of Guliapolska is encircled, but for some reason the Ukrainians are not retreating. But they're wasting time because in coming days the Ukrainians could be encircled completely without any chances for evacuation, which means that most likely in coming days either the Ukrainians will retreat under command of their officers, or they will make this decision by themselves. Anyway, the changes in this area will be. Furthermore, we have adjusted the map between the settlements of Gorka and Zalizhnye. According to this video, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians that were moving through this territory, which means that these fields are under complete Russian control. So despite the Ukrainian counterattacks in the northern Zaporizhzhia direction, we see that the Russians continue advancing further in the direction of the city of Orekhov. As for the western Zaporizhzhia direction, during the previous night we haven't received anything, but most likely in coming days we will receive additional changes, and most likely the changes would be in the Russian favor. Now let's move further. We have covered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation in the Western Africa, where the separatists continue their offensive operations on positions of the African Corps of the Russian Federation, of the Ministry of Defense of Russia, and the government forces of Mali. As you can see, we have lots of icons in this area, and according to these icons, according to the latest updates, the Russians continue withdrawing their positions from the borderlands. So the thing is, and the main problem for Russians and for the government forces of Mali is that their forces are stretched through the entire state of Mali. The government forces of Mali and the government of Mali and the Russians in this area have a very big army. We need to understand this. But the most important problem for Russians that their big army was cut into smaller pieces and was stretched through the entire state. Some forces are located on the territory of the capital of Mali, in the city of Bamako. Some forces were located in the area of the settlement of Kidal. Another group of forces and bases were located along the border with Algiers. We're talking about the settlement of Tisalit. Some forces were located along the border with the state of Niger in the eastern parts of Mali. This is the city of Minaka. Some forces were located in the most important city, the city of Gao, in the central part of Mali. Some forces were located around the main strategical industrial objects like gold mines along the river of Niger and so on. And now the Russians, when they realized that the situation is very complicated, they came to the conclusion that they are not able to hold the entire state of Mali, and they need to regroup, and they need to concentrate their forces and to create a feast. So that is why after first days of clashes, and when the separatists suffered huge losses, the Russians and the separatists and the state of Mali managed to reach an agreement, and according to this agreement, the Russians are able to withdraw their positions without losses and without being damaged or ambushed by the separatist forces. And according to this information, we start receiving reports that the Russians began retreating, withdrawing their positions from the settlement of Tisalit in the most northeastern part. The Russians began retreating from the city of Kidal in the eastern parts of the settlement. These two groups of forces are planning to combine common forces somewhere around the settlement of Anev, and from these positions the Russians will continue retreating towards the settlement of Gawa, which that has the only bridge through the river of Niger. Furthermore, the Russians and these Mali government forces are planning to retreat and to withdraw positions from the settlement of Minaka in the eastern part, and they're moving in the same direction to the city of Gawa. So the settlement of Gawa, this is the place where the Russians are planning to concentrate their troops and their forces from the eastern and the northeastern part of Mali. At the same time, we start receiving that separatists began offensive operation from the southern desert areas in the northern direction, and as a result of clashes, the separatists managed to enter the settlement of Gosi and the settlement by the name of Intahaka. So these are the change. We haven't added changes because we don't think that the separatists are able to hold their positions for a very long time. It seems that they're doing this without the understanding of the situation. But the most important thing, how fast the Russians from the northeast and the eastern part are able to get the city of Gawa. Obviously, it will take some time, but when the Russians and the Mali government forces get this territory, of course, from these positions they will begin the counter-offensive and counter-attacks with the purpose to stabilize the situation on, let's say, the Mali state side of the river of Niger. Furthermore, the separatists began counter-attacks in the northern direction to the north of the river of Niger, and we received reports about control over the settlement of Razilma. We have a video on this matter where we can see how separatists were raising their flag in this area. Furthermore, we received reports that the government forces and the Russians were forced to fall back from the area of the settlement of Timbuktu. We have videos on this matter, and we have the separatists consolidating their troops in this area. Furthermore, we had reports that the Russians decided to fall back completely from the city of Kidal, and the reason of this is that the separatists began using FPV drones to attack Russians in this area, and most likely the Russians realized that they're completely useless against FPV drone attacks, and they don't have enough equipment to probably fight with these threats. So that is why the Russians decided to fall back from this former UN base. So now we see that both sides are regrouping, both the Russians, the Mali government forces, and the separatists. Some sources are saying that everything is already lost for Russians, but this is not true. The Russians are not, the separatists don't ambush Russians, they don't attack them because probably they suffered huge losses. And the Russians from their side are regrouping towards the settlement of Gawa. Furthermore, we received updates that the situation is very difficult also on the territory of the city of Bamako, the capital of Mali. We have reports that the separatists began concentrating their troops in this area. After first days of riots, when the separatists suffered losses and were defeated, they took positions, and after a short operational pause, they began regrouping once again. And this morning we received lots of updates how the separatist troops using bikes were moving through the capital of Bamako, which means that in coming 24 hours more clashes will be recorded in this area. But once again, as of now, the Russians and the Mali government forces are limited in their actions. First they need to finish the regrouping, then most likely they will cut their army into pieces. One of the armies will stay along the river of Niger with the purpose to control the situation in this area, and the second part pot most likely would be returned back in the direction of the capital of Mali, Bamako, with the purpose to stabilize the situation. And when the situation is stabilized, then most likely the coalition of African Corps of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and Mali government forces will begin their counter-offensive operation once again, and they will start recovering control over the territories they lost during this difficult period of the state of Mali. So the most important things are still ahead of us. As for the conflict on the territory of the Middle East, according to information we have, the WTI oil price is about to get $100 per barrel. So now the price is $98.66 per barrel, and incoming hours probably will see a 100 mark to be hit by oil prices. And every time when oil prices approaches the 100 mark, something happens in the world, so which means that in coming 2-3 days something big might happen, and most likely the United States of America would be involved in this situation. Today the Secretary of State Rubio stated that the US cannot tolerate Iran normalizing control over the Strait of Hormuz. Furthermore, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also stated that while the surviving the Iranian leaders are trapped like drawing rats in a sewage pipe, Iran's creaking oil industry is starting to shut in production thanks to the US blockade. So the problem, and what exactly the United States of America trying to achieve by making a blockade situation, they're trying to make the situation when the Iranians would be forced to shut down the production of oil. And if it happens, and if the blockade is let's say opened, if the Strait of Hormuz is opened in then it will take lots of time for the Iranian industry and their oil industry to be reopened and to restart. So probably this is the most important task of the United States of America. And of course, by all these things, the Iranians are suffering huge economical losses. So this is the situation. The United States of America is waiting, but while they're waiting, we receive updates that their military ships are approaching the coast of Iran. A U.S. amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli was spotted from a satellite near the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz, approximately 115 kilometers from the coast of Oman and 465 kilometers from Iran. So we see that the United States of America, despite the ceasefire, despite the blockade, are getting their ships closer and closer to the state of Iran, and it seems that the United States of America is preparing itself before the beginning of a landing operation in this area. So everything is possible, everything might happen. But I would like to remind you that according to information we have, yesterday the president of the Russian Federation stated that despite anything, the Russians will support the Iranian side. Russia will do everything in the interests of Iran and other countries in the region to ensure peace in the Middle East as quickly as possible, which means that most likely yesterday the Iranians managed to get some backup from the Russian side, and now the Iranians are backed from Russia. Another important thing, of course, is China, what the Chinese are going to do with the situation. And today we received a report that the US Treasury Department has blacklisted a bank of China, a large private refiner in China, not bank, but refiner. And the sanctions are on escalation and will hurt Chinese petrochemical sector, with the company being a major producer of purified terephthalic acid and a big petrochemical supplier. So this is another round wave of escalation, but this time in the relations between the United States of America and China. So let's wait and see, of course, what is going to happen next. But one thing is clear, that oil prices most likely will hit a 100 mark in coming hours or maybe days. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.